What would you do if you suddenly lost the rights to your comic, manga, or webtoon project? Imagine spending years creating original characters, developing your fictional world, and drawing comic pages, only to lose ownership of it. In today's video, we will be discussing licensing and copyright with Queenie Chan, an Australian OEL manga artist who has been in the comic and manga industry for over 20 years. She has published comics with companies like Tokyopop, Random House, Bento Comics, Del Rey, and IPI Comics. She has even worked with the company Shoujo Beat. It goes without saying that today's special guest has seen it all. She is literally an OG international manga artist who has been drawing comics before the internet. As you know, with the rising popularity of webcomics, ebooks, and social media, it has never been easier to create comics, manga, and webtoons. What this means is there is a new generation of comic artists entering an industry that they might not know much about. Make sure to watch this video in its entirety because we want you to know how copyright works in the comic industry, what licensing rights you have as a creator, and how to make money as a manga artist. But before that, let me tell you about today's sponsor. Today's video is proudly brought to you by Skillshare. You may know Skillshare for their classes in photography, video editing, and illustration. But did you know that Skillshare has hundreds of career-focused classes too? Growing up, I have always wanted to find an alternative to working a 9-to-5 job. I wanted to live by my own rules, create my own work schedule, and pursue something that gave me fulfillment. If you find yourself in a similar situation, then maybe it is time to reinvent your goals and take control of your career and creative path. Traditional jobs are not one size fits all. Skillshare will teach you how to design a career to fit your interests and passions. This year, I want more financial stability. That is why I am currently taking the class Diversify Your Income, Earn Passive Income. This Skillshare curated course features several industry artists and highlights multiple different paths I can take to better monetize my business. I learned how to effectively run an online store, illustrate for merchandise, and use print-on-demand services. By taking this class, I have begun to figure out how I want to monetize my work in a way that can provide the best value for my audience and make more money in the long run. Without Skillshare, I may not have been able to take this first step. I want you to know that no goal is too small. Thinking about the future can be intimidating. Let me help you take some of the pressure off by starting small. Maybe you want to learn how to be more productive in your day-to-day life. Maybe you want to begin building a personal brand that is able to attract real clients. Skillshare will take us step by step and help us get closer to achieving our goals. So please, take this opportunity to invest in yourself. The first 1,000 people to use my unique link will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Thank you again, Skillshare, for continuing to support the creative community. Now let's get back to today's video.
My name's Queenie Chan. I'm a manga-style comic book artist. Being a non-Japanese, I'm originally from Hong Kong, so I'm Chinese. I draw manga-style comics, not exactly manga, because there's a lot of people who think that if you're not Japanese, you shouldn't use that word. So I first got started drawing when I was 18, which is much later than most people were. And I did it because I wanted to tell my own stories. And it was a real struggle at first because I never drew that much as a child except for school projects. I started putting my work up on the internet, and that was the beginning days of internet, dial-up modem and all. And eventually I managed to submit to a company called Tokyopop, and that was for a series called The Dreaming, and that was way back in 2005. I'm sure a lot of people know about Tokyopop. That's a long story. But after that, The Dreaming got me work with an author called Dean Koontz. If you read horror, you probably know who Dean Koontz is. He kind of lives next to Stephen King on the shelves. And we worked on a series of graphic novel prequels to his best-selling book series called Odd Thomas. That was 3 books, and then I went on to work for a lady called Kylie Chan, doing the same thing, a prequel to her A White Tiger series. She's an Australian Chinese fantasy author. After that, the market changed quite a bit, so I decided to go and strike out and do my own thing. I did a series called Fable Kingdom, did a few short story collections. Now I'm working on a series of non-fiction graphic novels about famous historical queens. The Dreaming is actually, the rights have finally left Tokyopop, so I'm working on revising the 3 books and then continuing the story, which is something that I always wanted to do. My website's at queeniechan.com, and you could just buy my books on online bookstores as well. Follow me on social media. I usually just post art and whatever books I have coming out there.
Like many of you, I have been drawing comics and manga since I was a kid. I have always been the creative type and took art classes throughout elementary school, middle school, high school, and university. I self-published my very first comic online when I was 14 and worked with a comic publisher for the first time when I was 16. Queenie, on the other hand, had a very unique origin story compared to most graphic novelists. At first, she did not want to create comics.
I came from a family that didn't really like art very much, and I was discouraged from pursuing it. Not that I was that interested as a child either. I was actually more into video gaming. Grew up playing a lot of games and reading a lot of manga and anime, and that started way back in Hong Kong, because Hong Kong in the early 80s was really flooded by pirated manga from Japan. And there was some popular anime on TV as well, so I was really exposed to that. So after I moved to Australia when I was 6 years old, when my parents migrated, I just continued that hobby. Went back to Hong Kong regularly to buy manga, and there was some in Chinatown program over here as well. When I became a teenager, I guess I was more invested in the idea of becoming a programmer so I can work on video games. But unfortunately, when I graduated after taking a degree in information systems at university and going into programming, there was a dot-com bust. And so everyone was firing and no one was hiring. At the time, I had started drawing in university as a way to escape some of the stuff that I didn't like at university. Like uni didn't turn out to be what I thought it would be. And so I really struggled at university, and one of the ways that I would escape was just to start drawing manga, writing my own stories, and that kind of made me feel better. But after I couldn't find a job in the industry, I then went to see what other skills I had to see whether it could be converted into an actual career. And it was then that I went scrolling through the internet. I found a notice from a company called Tokyopop who was looking for international manga submissions. And so I thought, yeah, I could just submit my stuff to them, and that's how it got started. I'm kind of glad I didn't end up doing the programming thing.
For those of you that don't know, Tokyopop is an American distributor, licensor, and publisher of anime, manga, manhwa, and Western manga style works. The company was founded by Stuart J. Levy, an influential figure in popularizing manga in the West. You may have read some of Tokyopop's licensed manga series like Beck, Girls Bravo, GTO, Love Hina, Rave Master, Cardcaptor Sakura, Fruits Basket, Sailor Moon, Tokyo Mew Mew, Blame, Chobits, and Battle Vixens. What made Tokyopop unique was they also licensed work from Korean comic artists. In 2002, they also launched their Rising Stars of Manga contest. This is one of the first attempts to normalize international manga. In total, over 500 American artists submitted 15 to 25-page short stories to the competition. 2 years later, in 2004, Tokyopop launched their global manga publishing program.
Ancient history, but I think it's pretty valuable to hear about it. Like, the weirdest thing about that was that growing up in Australia, like, nobody knew what anime and manga was. Like, it was just those weird Japanese cartoons with big eyes, and people made fun of you for drawing it in high school. I copped a lot of crap for that. High school was always awful, but I think 90s high school was especially awful. What changed in Australia was that around about 1997, there was this company called Manga Films or something that put out all these adult kind of X-rated anime at the local Blockbuster, and anime acquired a little bit of a reputation for being really edgy adult porn. After a while, I eventually stumbled on the Tokyopop notice that they were, looking for international manga artists to submit their stuff. Because previously I was looking at Taiwanese manga publishers to see whether I could, submit to a competition or something like that, do a 30-page short story, because they do competitions. But when I saw the Tokyopop notice, I was baffled. By 2002, Tokyopop had managed to get a lot of shoujo manga into traditional bookstores, and they were selling like hotcakes because traditional American manga had absolutely nothing for girls. It was mostly dominated in the 90s by superhero stories. And even though there was a lot of indie stuff going on in the American comic scene as well, I would say none of it was really targeted towards girls in the way that shoujo manga was. So they were looking to get their own stuff and get the rights to that. Being an LA-based company, they were angling at the Hollywood thing now that they found a money spout. I was young, I was pretty clueless, I had no idea how these sorts of things worked, and so I thought, I'm gonna get published. I published some of my comic pages and just sent it off to them, because back then it was pretty early, so it was easy to get my foot in the door. I also, at the time, was doing some online comics as well, because there were a number of online comic creators, because the online comics community was thriving, and some of these people had subscriptions. So I worked briefly for a subscription site called Wirepup before I submitted to Tokyopop. So I was actively trying to make a career out of drawing manga. So a few years later, after I finally got my contract with Tokyopop to do a 3-book series, they would be swapped, mountains of mails by submission from people all over the world. And so they just had no time to go over it. So I was lucky in that I got in it early. Most people that I know who submitted to Tokyopop was okayed on the first go. I was rejected 3 times until they finally told me to draw a haunted school story for 14-year-old girls. And I just had like 1 week to come up with a concept. And that was the dreaming. So it's pretty amazing that the dreaming held together as well as it did. It was one of the very few stories from Tokyopop, original stories, that actually got finished. Most people did not manage to finish their 3rd book or even their 2nd book. My commissioning editor did not even speak to me for the entirety of book 1. She never really talked to me. All she did was copy edit my scripts to the extent where I thought that editors didn't talk to authors. And I came up with this story entirely on my own. And people are shocked when they hear about that. They didn't expect that a young author would get actually no guidance in a story like that. And it still turned out quite well. How other people did it at Tokyopop, they were supposed to produce a style Bible. A producer style Bible is where you draw all the characters in character turnarounds and things like that, like in animation, and talk about the world, talk about the background, what people are supposed to refer to when they're trying to check the consistency of your story and things like that. You're supposed to do that. I didn't do that at all, because I was not told. about it by my editor. And she later got fired near the end of book 1. I was given a deadline and that was it. And so I kind of paced myself and did that entirely on my own. Because a lot of people struggle with their deadlines. It's 160 something pages. Mine was about 180 with the first volume of The Dreaming, and same for all the other 2. For that, the launching of book 1, she was fired and I was replaced by a second editor who was much better. And I remember her picking up The Dreaming and was like, where's everything? Where's the Slow Bible? Where's the scripts? Blah, blah, blah. Well, I did end up doing the scripts for book 2 and 3 with her. Then she got fired just before book 2 launch, which is really bad because you do need your editor to represent you at marketing meetings. If your editor forgets to represent you, then you just don't get a marketing budget and your book just gets dropped and everyone forgets about it. And this is especially bad when I had to change editors just before the book ended and you have to start the publishing process. Changing editors is actually really bad too, just because editors sometimes, if they don't care about your book, they will just cancel it. And that's not for Tokyopop, that's for traditional publishing. If you work for the big publishers, I've heard plenty of stories from prose publishers as well. I was just bounced around and I had to manage the whole thing on my own. But hey, I got my 3 books out and it just taught me that you're the one who have to know what you're doing. You can't really rely on your editors.
An original English language manga, or OEL manga, is a comic book or graphic novel drawn in the style of manga and originally published in English. As a child, I never knew OEL manga was different from Japanese manga. To me, it all looked the same. However, for many fans of Japanese manga, they are unable to support OEL manga. I have heard many reasons from these types of manga fans. Some say the artwork does not look Japanese enough, some say the stories are lackluster compared to popular Japanese manga, and others think it's cultural appropriation. Regardless of how you feel about OEL manga, it's safe to say the anime community looks at Japanese manga and OEL manga as 2 different mediums.
It was pretty clear that the editors did not really tell anyone that they had to draw in a Japanese style. Otherwise, they would not have licensed some of the stuff that they did from various American artists. People who did read manga also didn't like any of the so-called, what we call original English language, OEL manga people. And I was very surprised at the time. I thought there would be support from manga readers. They were quite hostile to the idea of OEL because part of the reason that particular crowd was reading manga was because of the novelty and, it's different. And it's very Japanese, and here are a bunch of pretentious Americans thinking that they could do what these special Japanese can do. It's like, oh, you guys should be ashamed of yourself. But a lot of these people were offended that we were appropriating the term manga. There's been so many attempts to do ongoing OEL manga over the years, and nothing really that particularly stuck. There's some good stuff coming out of France, but then France has a very different comics culture compared to the Anglospheres, so to speak. So, yay for all the French manga artists who are slaying it because it is France and they've got the second largest manga market outside of Japan. There's that, and there's a lot of manhwa as well, and Chinese manhwa. I guess in a very, very crowded market, it does make it hard for international English language work to succeed because it's so crowded and there's so many people doing so many things. You see, one of the original problems with the Tokyopop OEL manga line was that even though someone like me, I draw in a manga style, I deliberately don't look entirely like manga. The Dreaming was really unusual looking for its time because while you can't say that it's not inspired by manga, it's very definitely manga inspired. The style of toning that I use really made it look very different from any manga from Japan. If you know what you're looking at, then yeah, you can spot the difference. A lot of the OEL manga they put out, some were tried to be manga influenced, others were definitely not manga, very indie American comic style. And I think trying to label all of that American manga just kind of rubbed people the wrong way.
Getting published with a comic magazine or a book distributor is the goal for many independent comic artists. There is one common misconception among amateur artists though, especially younger ones. I have received many DMs and comments from aspiring manga artists who believe they will be set for life if they manage to get published in a magazine or get books sold in stores. The reality is that is far from the truth. The comic industry is not a lucrative business, and it is very hard to make a living by only drawing comics.
The thing about getting paid is that in comics, it's a very expensive thing to do. You get paid a lump sum. If you're doing comics today, it's still the same. Ideally, you get a page rate that can support you, but that's pretty much gone these days. I actually was getting paid very little. And the most I was paid was actually working on the Dean Koontz book, but that was no royalty payments to me. And I didn't own any of the rights. I was just work for hire, so that was a really good rate, but it's just work for hire. For the Dreaming, I was paid a okay amount, I guess, for the work that I was doing. But the thing about the lump sum that you're paid up front is that it's the loan. Okay, a loan you don't have to pay back. Any royalties you earn from the sale of your books, they take advance from your royalties before you start earning more royalties. You don't get any royalty payments until you earn back whatever lump sum it is. For those people who think that if you start selling your book and you start earning royalties right away, that's not how it works. A lot of books don't earn out their advances, meaning that a lot of people never ever see royalties on their books. I'm kind of more concerned about the money aspect, because at the end of the day, if something fails, like a publishing imprint fails or something, it's usually because they don't make enough money. And publishing is very easy to lose a lot of money in. Like if you publish comics of any kind, it's a very often a money losing venture. And there's that old joke, how do you make a small fortune in comics? You start with a big fortune.
One of the concepts that really confused me early on in my comic making journey was copyright. Copyright is a type of intellectual property that protects original works of authorship as soon as the author fixes the work in a tangible form of expression.
Okay, if you don't control the copyright, the right to sell and reproduce your work, and resell it for money, licensing, then someone else is going to license it and they're going to make most of the money. And you might see a little bit of it if they feel like it. But, there's all kinds of accounting tricks that people can pull to make money disappear. In fact, that's actually the biggest problem in any kind of creative industry, whether you're talking about publishers or movie distributors or music distributors. A lot of the time it's fraud. People just suck money right off the books and make up all these random expenses that really shouldn't be charged to your account, but is anyway. Like that happens a lot in any kind of creative industry. Really need to understand copyright and how to negotiate and make sure that you get paid for your work. And that's why I'm so big about the owning your copyright thing, because a lot of the time, if you go with a big publisher, they would demand your full copyright, is that they will own it. Previously, you can actually argue for rights reversion, but what's changed is accounting standards with them. It used to be, if you're a book publisher, the value of your book publishing company is actually in its stock. So your print books are sitting in a warehouse somewhere. That used to be the measure of the value of your company. Nowadays, it's all in IP, so it's intellectual property. So if you sell a book to a big publisher, like the big five, like Random House, Penguin, Collins, Simon & Schuster, etc., you sell a book to these companies, they're going to do everything in their power to keep the rights all for themselves. And it's going to be very hard to get a rights reversion these days from these companies. You spend all this time creating a story and then you lose the rights to it. You pretty much lose it forever, unless you manage to get a really, really good lawyer. But generally speaking, people do not get the rights to their books back. And this is especially an issue with manga and comics, because it takes so much more time to write and draw a comic compared to a prose fiction. So that's why I'm very, very concerned about the rights of creations by manga artists and comic artists.
I have personally only dealt with magazine serialization, not book deals. So could you please explain to me what the difference is between the two in regards to copyright?
I draw comics for magazines as well. I get paid per page for that, but I always make sure I own the copyrights to that as well. And the reason for that is that with magazines, I work for a magazine called Cookie, and I occasionally pitch stories to them and get paid, like very short 6-page stories. But I do get paid for that, and what they're paying for is actually right of first reprint. It used to be worth a fair amount of money, but it's not anymore because of the internet. And if you publish work on the internet, there goes your right of first reprint. Now with book publishing it's different, but in magazine publishing it's like that. It's an example of being aware that if you deal with any kind of publisher, be it magazine or book, what exactly are you selling them? With magazine publishers, you're selling the right of first reprint. First reprint is what the entire manga industry in Japan runs on. What Shonen Jump does is that it pays you a page rate for whatever you're producing. And that page rate is not for the production of that page. That page rate is for the magazine's right to be the first publisher to publish that work and show it to the public. And a lot of people don't understand that. They think that, Shonen Jump is paying me to draw the thing. No. If you own the copyright, all right, they're not paying you to draw it, because if you own the copyright, you're paying yourself to draw it, okay? If you own the copyright, that's not what they're paying you for, because if you own the copyright, then you're self-funding everything. So Shonen Jump is not paying you to draw this. And what Shonen Jump is paying for is the right to be the first person to publish that. And then later on, that's separate rights, where they collect all the chapters into a single book and they sell it. That's a separate right as well, compared to the right of first reprints. And that's why the Japanese manga industry can function. Because first you are serialized in something that actually makes money. At least Shonen Jump charges a subscription, for what they do. That's how you actually make some money. I don't know how much they make, but you can calculate their phone book sales and you can probably do some rough calculation. They don't make that information public for the Shonen Jump app, how many people are actually paying for the app, what's being read, and so on and so forth. We don't really know what's going on there because they don't make those figures public. But the truth is that when Japanese manga artists get their work collected into a single book, they don't have a advance that they need to pay off, because that work has already been done and they've already been paid in terms of licensing fees to put that work out there. And so when they get their tankobon out there after they serialize it, and serialization is good advertising for the series, they start earning royalties on that book right away. In the West, you do not have something like that. People have tried it. I remember working for Shoujo Beat, that was with Yen Press. I think that was Hachette. That's a major publisher as well. They tried it with Shoujo Beat. It didn't end up working. It was just too expensive to do a magazine. The circulation figures just weren't there. And if the circulation figures aren't there, then you just cannot get the right of first reprint serialization happening. And if you can't get that happening, you have to rely on advance. And when you get an advance, then you have to earn back the advance through your book sales to make it a successful book.
In my experience, I have been paid very little for the work that I have done for comic publishers. For the first magazine that I was published in, I wasn't financially compensated. I was only given free copies of the magazine issues that my work was featured in. I was also never financially compensated for any work that I did for my last publisher. At the time, I thought this was normal and what should be expected. It is unfortunate to say this, but I have made significantly more money doing commissions for personal clients, being a YouTuber who talks about making comics and manga, and self-publishing my own products. I was paid upwards of $100 per page for some comic projects in the past from personal clients.
For me, I do find it kind of concerning that there seems to be a never-ending crop of young artists that come up and ripe for exploitation by established publishers or, newer companies like Webtoons and things. And that's why I wanted to talk so much about Tokyopop and money, because I think that is the greatest barrier to getting, any kind of substantial non-East Asian OEL manga community happening and making it continue. The problem is never whether people are wanting to draw OEL. There are multiple, ridiculous numbers of people wanting to draw OEL. It's just, is there a proper way for them to get their work out there that will allow them to benefit monetarily from it, as opposed to have someone else make all the money? Because that is how artists leave the industry. That is how they have to go out and get a real job, and then they lose interest or time in drawing anything at all, which is terrible. And a lot of it's got to do with the mindset of the artist. It's like, what do you think you're coming here to do? What do you think that you're going to get out of it? And how do you see what you're doing in the long run? You lose a lot of talent that way. But again, people like the publishers don't really care, because you have a never-ending crop of young people that you hope that you would be able to make a lot of money off. And a lot of these people don't end up, making enough money off their royalties, because a lot of them start off with pretty bad contracts.
This experience isn't unique to us though. If you have been keeping up with the ComicsBrokeMe hashtag on Twitter, many comic artists have come forward to share their negative experiences working with established publishers. Industry professionals have revealed how unfair some publishers can be when it comes to editorial support, promotion, and financial compensation. Like I mentioned earlier, it is very hard to make a livable wage by just drawing comics and manga. That is why you see artists who have a large social media presence on Instagram, YouTube, Twitch, and TikTok. That is also why you see artists selling products like prints, stickers, online courses, brush packs, and more. Some artists even offer consultation services, workshops, and one-on-one mentoring. Crowdfunding has also become more popular in recent years, with platforms like Patreon, Ko-fi, and Kickstarter all taking off.
First things first, how you make money, just make sure you don't lose money. I mean, for me, I do what I do because I love it and I don't expect to make a lot of money of it. And I think that's a lot of the problems that younger creators have, because they come into the mindset of drawing comics is that I'm going to make a career out of it. Japanese manga artists barely make a career out of it. And I'm talking about in Japan, the publishers, particularly Shonen Jump, are slave drivers. People destroy their health to get their work out on time. Is it worth it? Because a lot of them don't make it through that magic portal when they become the next, My Hero Academia guy or the next One Piece. Like 99.99% of people don't end up like that. So even in Japan, there's a lot of people who do not make money off manga either. It's just something that they do. And you can see it in Korean webtoons as well. Korean manhwa, they die, literally. The solo leveling guy, that guy literally worked himself to death. Labor violations in South Korea is just as big a problem as it is in Japan and elsewhere. So when I see the money issue, I kind of advise people to be realistic about it and be practical. It's like, do not do anything that will make you lose money, okay? And make sure that if you do a page rate and it's not particularly high, then make sure that you own the copyright to it, because then you can resell it. I go to conventions a lot. I socialize a fair amount of cons, so people know who I am, and a lot of that comes from my work with Tokyopop, so I have to be grateful for that. And so people invite me to cons and they give me free tables as a guest, because tables at conventions are so expensive now. The major cons in Australia, they charge something like $350, $400 a table for an entire weekend. It used to be something like $50, $150 a table. And because attendance at cons have gone way up and they've attracted a lot more mainstream, normal, average kind of crowd. And so the cost of the table has gone up. So if you're selling books, you have to factor in things like printing costs, things like that. But I don't go to conventions to make money. Like I said, I treat drawing my comics as something like a hobby, like a second stream of income. And so I do manage to make money off that. With something like Fable Kingdom, which is a 3-book series, it takes me about 200 pages each, because it's a mix of prose and comics, so I'm able to tell out more story in a shorter amount of time in terms of work. So I charge about $20 per book, because it's about 200 something pages. It costs me about $7 to print per book, so I make about $10, $12 off each book. And it's an old series now. I made about $10,000 profit just from sitting at conventions and selling these books. The third way that I've actually managed to make money, inexplicably, this is like an opportunity that dropped from heaven, was that I did a short story for Walker Books, and that was for free because it was a charity project. In the US, there's like this gigantic educational kind of score testing kind of companies that do comprehension testing or something, and someone saw it and they say, I want to do this story. And so at first, when I was contacted by the publisher, Walker Books, saying that, yeah, there's this big educational publisher that wants to publish it, I was like, oh yeah, go ahead. It's, good to be part of the educational system. And then the Walker Books was nice enough to tell me, the lady that was talking to me was like, you shouldn't just say yes, you should ask money for it because you are licensing it. And so they say, what you usually do is like, you license this for 5 years, you pay me $400 for the right to license this to use in your educational testing thing. And I was like, oh, okay, thank you very much. That was very nice of her to tell me because I didn't know anything about that. And so I went back to them and said that, and they said, 5 years is too hard. $2,000 for the whole second rights. And this is non-exclusive rights. So I gave them non-exclusive rights to publish part of the story, and they tell you exactly in the contract what parts that they want to publish. And then they'll pay me $2,000 just for the right to publish that in a little comprehension test. So that's an example of licensing, and that's only something that you can do if you own the original copyright. The Dreaming actually became a bit of a bestseller in Turkey. So the Turkish publisher licenses that. I actually got a book tour out of it. So foreign publishers, again, if you don't own the copyright, you can't license it to foreign publishers. And Fable Kingdom was published by a Czech Republic publisher. So it's an example of how important copyright is and how it ties directly into the money question. You give it away, unless you are super popular, and that does happen, people. They become the next J.K. Rowling or whatever. That's the dream, isn't it? It does happen to people. Is that if you license them away, unfortunately, a lot of middlemen is going to take that money, and very little may possibly get into your hands. You don't want to be too tough whenever you negotiate with a publisher. You don't want to be not tough enough, and you want to understand what a publishing contract is supposed to say, and you be very careful about things like dates and wording and what you're trying to do. Is like people aren't necessarily out to scam you, but when the wording is like pretty awful, then it's probably not a good idea to sign it, not in this day and age. It doesn't matter if you're not successful. There's a lot of people who didn't end up drawing manga because they needed to get a real job, and so they just didn't draw for 15 years, and now they're really miserable. If you're an artist, if you're a creative, it's something that you need to do, just do it. Do it as a hobby. Make sure you don't give your work out for free, because then you're devaluing your worth in the eyes of yourself and everyone else. Treat it as something that you do, and treat it as something as value, and do what you like. I think one of the biggest mistakes I've ever made is to try and do work that I don't enjoy in the hope that I'll make more money, because it makes me miserable, and I can't think of a single time that it actually did work. Now that I've been doing this for 20 years and all, and I'm still working on it, I still enjoy the process. So many young people go into it, they come out completely disillusioned, the churn it and burn it kind of thing. So few people keep on doing it, like writing their own stories, drawing their own comics. If you go in with the right mindset of what you're trying to do, then it's fine. But if you don't have the right mindset, it can really burn you out and ruin your health and all that. Do not ruin your health over this. It's not worth it.
I hope you were able to get some value out of this video. I want to take this moment to once again thank Queenie Chan for taking time out of her day to join me in today's video. Copyright and licensing is a complicated topic, so I hope this video was able to help you understand it just a little bit more. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't already. Leave a comment down below if you have any more questions about copyright, publishing, and licensing rights. Make sure to support Queenie Chan by following her on social media and consider purchasing one of her books. I will leave all of her links down in the description box below. As always, keep creating, everyone. I will see you all in the next one.